Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state. It's now 45 years after independence, and we are failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And so we've been stuck with this corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF dictatorship. And after 45 years of gross mismanagement, rampant corruption, it is no surprise that the economy is in total economic ruin. And the political system is in paralysis. We cannot come up with a way forward. The opposition that the nation had looked to help them end the Zanu PF dictatorship has itself become corrupted by the same Zanu PF to the point where many people have rightly said the opposition MDC CCC is Zanu PF Team B in all but name. Even when they had the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms, which would have stopped the Zanu PF dictatorship, they failed to implement even one token one. And ever since the failed GNU of 2008 to 2013, the opposition has been participating in flawed elections, knowing fully well that they are flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they were only giving Zanu PF legitimacy. And yet they've conned their people, their followers, to participate in their millions. What has gone wrong? I think the underwriting problem in Zimbabwe's political problem is greed. As much as other nationalist organizations, ANC of South Africa, for instance, did wage an armed struggle, the ANC was one block ahead of Zanu PF, in that the party was committed to delivering freedom, human rights, liberty, justice to all South Africans. ANC was anchored to these values and was so committed to it, they produced what they call the Freedom Charter, in which they made those promises. This is what we are fighting for. Zanu PF paid lip service to freedom, human rights, justice, a fair share in the country's wealth. What they really cared about is absolute power and the right to loot the nation's wealth. Here is one of the tapes of Blessed Geza talking about his so-called Geza revolution. his fight to remove Mnangagwa because he's corrupt and incompetent. But in this video, he is actually telling us what this is really all about.
aiwaga mirani kutaurire imwe zvinhu zvinoitika ani ndiri kutokutaurira kuratidza kuti hatina kupusaka because ndiri kutokutaurira kutozviziva takapusaka ndisikakutauriri zvese we'll deal with this situation at the appropriate time but ndiri kutotaura kuti commander vamunangagwa right navachiwenga handidi right ngavadissolve policy bureau tikwane izvo varizive chunhu ngavadissolve cabinet inozinana kazembe vana soda havamboziuta vane kumaniwa vane kambamura vanani why do you hate your comrades kune mageneral kune retired CIO vakawanda kune retired commissioners of police and other city officers vakawanda havadiwe.
Maybe the president is looking at capacity and capability.
Bullshit. Vana grade 7 ane capacity and capability. Grade 7 oita bish yokuti nhasi aitwa minister of state mangwana provincial minister isiripo. We are not apologetic about it. Chinhu chedu ichi toda kutopinda noda kuti president vanipozi mota varipo toda mabodyguards.
But you've got your own cars. You've got a hotel at your house that you built in Sanyat. Why do you want all this?
I want to be rewarded this way, not to be used like a political condom all the time. I'm not a political condom. And urukora vana mahiya vaya navamwe.
What you are saying there is the truth. Zanu PF, for all their rhetoric, have never really been committed to delivering freedom and human rights and dignity to all Zimbabweans. Mugabe and his cronies have been fighting for absolute power and the right to loot. That is what it's all been about. And they've paid lip service to freedom, liberty, etc., to entice the ordinary people to join them in the fight. But whenever the fight was getting to the point where the fight is over, Zanu PF has seen to it that they have stepped forward and told them, Chunichedwich, this is our thing. And they have the right to absolute power and the right to loot. In an article in 2018, Duran Stuart wrote the following article commenting on the situation in Zimbabwe, in which he said the situation in Zimbabwe is no different from what it was when Mugabe was in power. because the individuals, Mnangagwa and company, have become committed to holding on to power just as passionately as Mugabe himself was. Indeed, their love of power is such that they would burn the house down than let anybody else rule the country. That's when you realize we are in serious trouble. Mnangagwa and company would rather burn the house down than let anybody else rule it. What some people have forgotten is how the regime has always turned back to the people, assuring them of their freedom, their liberty, etc., etc., when they want them to join in the fight against whatever threat there is. There's been factional fights within Zanu PF. The last one, 2017, which culminated in the coup, was headed by this gentleman, this fellow.
That Robert Mugabe should be recalled from his role as the president and first secretary of Zanu PF. All the political parties should embrace this. They should support this move, because we anticipate a situation after this where there will be inclusivity, because no one person, no one political party can solve our problems. So we want political convergence.
The interesting thing about it is that whilst he was adamant they wanted political inclusivity, when Mugabe signed the letter of resignation, the war veterans and those behind the coup imposed Mnangagwa, Chunichelu, and they made it very clear, just as our friend Blessed Geza has made it very clear in this video as well. Chunichelu. The people all of a sudden were no longer required and they were pushed aside. Zimbabwe is a failed state. And as long as we have got a political system in which a few individuals believe they have the divine right to rule the country, those who fought in the liberation war have the veto to decide who governs the country, Zimbabwe is going nowhere. What is the way forward? Well, I've said this before and I'll say it again. At the present moment, What we are witnessing in Zanu PF is a factional war. The biggest mistake we made in 2017 is believing one faction that they were this time going to deliver on their promises of freedom, human rights, one man, one vote, which they failed to do when the country gained its independence in 1980. We were foolish to believe it. And so we came out on the streets in support of the coup. We should not have done that. We should have stood our ground and made our demands very clear. We want a Zimbabwe in which all Zimbabweans have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. This whole idea that because they fought in the liberation war, they have the right, the divine right to rule, it's nonsense. Otherwise, every generation will have to take up arms and fight the generation before them for them to have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. We must break this vicious cycle of individuals who think they have the right to the country's choicest fruit by right of conquest. The commitment to free, fair, and credible elections should not be extended only to those who fought in the liberation war. It is a fundamental right of all Zimbabweans. It is more than a right. It is the basis, the essence of good governance. After 45 years of gross mismanagement, rampant corruption, and tyrannical oppression, Zimbabwe is desperate to close that chapter and move on. And we can only close that chapter by finally accepting that the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country is not a privilege, it's a right. And that there should be no one who is above the law, who has got the divine right to deny other people a meaningful say in the governance of the country. We can't be going over this over and over again and making absolutely no progress. The so-called Geza revolution is nothing more than a repeat of the 2017. Geza has made it abundantly clear. What he wants is to be minister. He wants a bodyguard. He wants the big car for himself. Yes, it just happens to be that he was in the wrong basket. Those who are close to Mnangagwa have got the big cars, have got the bodyguards. He is in the wrong basket. The Chiwenga faction they found themselves sidelined. And so all we'll be doing here with this so-called Gesa revolution is removing one dictator and a few around him and replace him with another dictator, and then it's business as usual. The looting continues. I think that is what is wrong with our political system. The people of Zimbabwe, in a free, fair, and credible election, are the only ones who should be the source of the mandate to govern the country. This whole idea that if those who fought in the liberation war, this is their thing, they have the divine right to rule the country, is nonsense. And after 45 years, with the country up to its eyeballs, in serious economic trouble, we must stand up now and call it safe, say it for what it is. Nonsense. So I repeat, we expect the Gesa revolution to send out the signal to the people of Zimbabwe to come out in the street to support the revolution. The people must know that all it's seeking to do is to replace one dictator with another. This is not what we want. What we want is an end to the dictatorship. And we should have the discipline not to be tempted by the cheap promises that, oh, this time we will deliver all the other things. They're not going to deliver all the other things. As he clearly states himself here. He thinks it's his turn to rule. And yes, absolutely no, he's not going to give up that right to allow ordinary Zimbabweans to vote him and his colleagues into power or vote for somebody else. That he will not tolerate. Chunu chelu. That is what he means by that. I think that is what we must reject, and particularly, and we should not compromise on that. Think about it. Have a good day.